up, and they make me feel good. Trained a client or two, made a couple bucks. Still not able to go home because the rent was too high. I was paying a weekly rent over there, right? Come into the next week, I don't have the money to pay my rent, which means that they're gonna close the door on my room and put a lock on it in this kind of boarding house that I was living in, right? But I get an opportunity after that to kind of reinvent myself. One client, two clients, another client pays $900. Now I'm able to pay my rent, and eventually I made enough money to move here and then continue on reinventing myself, leaving that behind, right? Now those memories are there, all those things are there, but the reality for me is that, I'm made new. So new that people who knew me in that state don't recognize me. You understand? So that's the reinvention. So what I wonder for you guys is, how many times have you got the opportunity to reinvent yourself, or have you thought about the opportunities that you have to reinvent yourself? It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're single, whether you're old, whether you're incarcerated, whether you're in a mental ward, it doesn't matter where you are in life, you always have an opportunity to reinvent yourself, right? Another personal story, I hope you guys don't mind. I have to talk from experience because I've had a life, right? And that's why I'm sharing these kind of things with you. It's not that you have to have a life in order to share your life with someone else, but you have to go through something, grow through something, right? Yeah, most of us have had some kind of experience where you've come out of it on the other end and you've learned something. You're like, what, if I can teach one person, not to make that mistake, boy, how their life would be different. If somebody taught me not to make that mistake, boy, how my life would be different, right? So, I had adopted, at the age of, a very young age of 3. I was abandoned by my mother. I don't know who my father is. That's kind of the situation with many young kids, unfortunately. Between the age of 3 and about 7 or 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there, my memory is very vague. My sister's here, so hopefully she can give some validity to some of these things. I traveled around to different foster homes and different group homes, and then eventually I got adopted by a family by the age of 12, 10, 12, somewhere around there, right? And when I got adopted, my birth name is Kalia Bell. No one else asked that. Few people. My birth name is Kalia Bell, right? And when I got adopted, my adopted mother said, "You know what I'm going to do? I want to give you my grandfather's name." His name was Arthur. He was an escaped slave who escaped from the South on a wine boat and made it to the north. I think it was Philly or where he was. And she put on my heart kind of how powerful he was, how strong he was, just how his voice impacted other people that are around him and impacted her in life, And when she gave me that name, she gave me a choice, really. She said, "No, Kalia is not the name that I want you to have. There's some things attached to that I want you to really get over. And I want to name you Arthur." And she said, "But you can pick any A name in the book." She named my brother. My brother's name was Aline. She adopted 5 of us, right? All biological boys. My brother's name was Aline. She changed it to Albert. That was my adopted father's name. I wanted my name to be Andrew. I thought that was cooler than Arthur. And she said, "Well, Andrew's cool, but this is what Arthur means." And I'm like, "There's no way I'm taking on a name like Arthur from Kalia. It's just not going to happen." But she said, "This is what Arthur means," and I really believed in that. And she made me believe in that. And taking on that name really helped to reinvent myself. I'm 10, 12 years old. I'm sorry about not having the exact age, but it's a little vague. I'm 10, 12 years old, right? And I'm going between, 5th grade and 6th grade. I'm in school. Imagine calling somebody Kalia up until 5th grade, and then they come back and they're like, "My name's Arthur." And you're like, "What? What's your name?" Right? So I now had to really reinvent myself because now my name is Arthur, and I have to tell people and convince them that I'm not just full of shit and just making something up. That's the first thing I have to do. Second thing I have to do now is the accountability that my mother put on me to live up to what that name actually meant. Right? I lost her by the time I was 14, and by the time I was 14, I forgot what that name meant to her. So I forgot what that name meant to me. And then I had other opportunities in life to continue to reinvent myself, but I want you to know that through life, it's really full of reinventions, right? How many of you guys went from high school, where everybody to college, and you get to college and you reinvent yourself completely? Some of you reinvent yourself to be cooler than what you were. I know I was one of those people, right? But I lived upstate New York, and in upstate New York, I was the man, but I got to college, and all these kids were from New York City, and upstate New York, we want to be from New York City, we get to New York City, and all of a sudden, just because you're Brooklyn, you're cool, and I'm like, I don't know about that, but everybody else believed it, so I had to believe it, right? But they're working on reinventing, and I realized that the kids from the city really reinvent themselves when they go to college, really. They go all types out, all types of they were drug dealers, they was this, they was that. Please, stop it. Anyway, so I want to give you another example of reinvention, and this is kind of an example I wanted to give because I didn't want to only touch on me, I wanted to touch on some actual factual history stuff, right? So, John Newton, anyone know who John Newton was? No? All right, so John Newton was a captain of a slave ship, right? I probably should have got the times and dates and stuff, but I figured that stuff's not important. The story is important, right? So John Newton was a captain of a slave ship, and John Newton, for most of his early life, transported slaves back and forth, and he drank, he hung out. He was the meanest, slave ship driver there was. They actually put slaves that were defiant on his ship, because he knew that he would treat them so badly, that they would, by the time they got to wherever they were, they'd be so happy to be a captive of someone else other than this guy on their voyage across, right? So, and one night, when he's traveling across, the world or wherever he was going in this ship, he didn't have human cargo at that time. This time he's just got some lumber that he's taking across, and a storm hit. A storm that was so bad that left him out to sea for 3 weeks. Left him out to sea for 3 weeks. So he's all types of praying to God. Lord, please, I'll never, bring another slave cargo. I'll never do this. I'll never do that. I'll never do that. Right? And he had an opportunity on the slave ship. On that ship, which was a slave ship at that time, was just a lumber ship. Right? He had an opportunity to reinvent themselves, and then he got on dry land after 3 weeks, got himself together, and probably could have went on doing what he was doing, but he remembered the promise that he made to himself, the promise that he made to God, to reinvent his life. And it's stated in history that, not only did he reinvent his life, but he also was one of the key players, in the abolitionist movement, which was, the movement to stop slavery. One of the key players in history. We're talking about someone who was a slave ship owner, and transported slaves over, and then towards the end of his life, after all of his mistakes and realizing what he's done wrong in his life, was one of the key players in making sure that slaves, weren't treated as cruelly as they were treated. Obviously, after that movement, there was still slavery for quite some time. But talk about reinventing your life, right? Now, none of us were slave owners, I don't believe. But if John Newton could be a slave owner, missing the most important part. John Newton is also the writer of Amazing Grace. Right? Everyone knows the song Amazing Grace. Right? So he's also the writer of Amazing Grace, one of the most popular gospel songs about reinventing your life. Right? About God's grace and how, just committing yourself. I don't want to go too far into the scripture or into the religious aspect of it, because that's not really what we're here for, but the reinvention has to happen with some accountability, and that accountability happens between yourself, between someone else, and between your creator. That's just what it is. If you think there's anything different, then you're mistaken. All right? So, what I want to do for you guys, and we're running out of time a little bit, but what I want you guys to do for me is do me a favor. Stand up if you can. I want you to find a space right in this mirror. Right here. It doesn't have to be close, but I want you to get close enough, maybe as close as as I am right now, and find a space in the mirror if you can. Get there, get there, get there, get there. Get there, get there, get there, get there. All right, very nice. So, right now I'm looking for you guys to repeat after me and say a couple things. The first thing I want you to say is, that sounds impossible. Wait. It's all good. It's all good. I'm going to give the instruction a little bit better, I promise. Right? So I want you guys to say, that sounds impossible, but let's do it. Go ahead.
That sounds impossible, but let's do it.
Right. Now I want you to turn to the person next to you and I want you to say, that sounds impossible, but let's do it.
That sounds impossible. That sounds impossible, but let's do it.
All right, now turn to the person next to you, on the opposite side next to you, and say, that sounds impossible, but let's do it.
That sounds impossible, but let's do it.
Very good. So, the reason why I have you looking in the mirror is because, first of all, you have to confess to yourself, right? You have to believe it to yourself. You have to look in the mirror and say to yourself, that sounds impossible, but let's do it. That sounds impossible, but I can do it. You may not be able to do it, but I can do that. That sounds impossible, but let's do it. You have to believe that, right? And before you can go on and tell anyone else about what you're doing or about how you're moving and how you got this going on, you have to first believe within yourself that that's possible. It sounds impossible for other people, but for you, I can do this, right? So that's the goal. What I want you to do is, when you get home, today, tomorrow, whenever you're home, doesn't matter when it is, right? I want you to look at yourself in the mirror and think about your goals. Think about your dreams. Think about the ones that fell. Think about the cards that you have in your pocket that I want back. All right? And think about, some of those things that you missed out on, and say to yourself, that sounds impossible, but I can do that. Right? You really, really have to believe that first and foremost before anyone else can give you any praise, can give you any compliments, before you can achieve anything that's long lasting. You really have to believe that, although it sounds impossible, you're the only person that can do it. All right, you guys can have it. All right. So I don't want to hold you guys any longer. This is really the time that I want you guys to use to kind of socialize and hang, or leave if you needed to do that. But either way, I want you to know that every Sunday we're going to be doing this. Every Sunday it's going to be, it's going to be different. It's going to be something different. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope that you had fun. I hope you had some value out of that. I hope that you come back also. I hope that me reading off of this didn't throw you off too bad. Hope that I didn't embarrass anyone. If I did, so what? Toughen out. Make sure you give my crown back, all right? No, that's too, all right? I just want to make sure that you get that. Listen, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I want to leave this time for you guys to talk. I really, really wanted to end by 2:45 so that you guys can kind of just talk and chat and have some networking opportunities. I have to introduce you to this young lady back here.